Welcome in, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at International Women's Day.
All right.
I think most people have at least heard of International Women's Day, but maybe not everyone knows a whole lot about it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you see on the calendar and maybe you see some stuff on social media and that's about it.
Exactly. So we're going to go a little deeper today and look at, where did this come from and sort of where are we now?
Right.
And I guess one of the first places to start is with the history.
Yeah, absolutely.
This goes way back to the beginning of the 20th century, and I was reading about this march in New York in 1908, 15,000 women
Wow.
marching for better working conditions and the right to vote. I mean, that must have been quite a sight.
I can't even imagine 15,000 people all together in one place for one cause. That's incredible.
Yeah, and so that kind of set the stage for the creation of International Women's Day just a couple years later.
Yeah, in 1910, there was this woman, Clara Zetkin, I believe it was,
Mhm.
and she was a German activist, and she proposed at a conference that there should be an International Women's Day, like a day for the whole world. And
Huh.
people were like, yeah, let's do it. So the very next year, in 1911, they had the first International Women's Day.
Wow, so they really didn't waste any time.
No, I didn't mess around, and it was actually really successful. It was celebrated in 4 different countries: Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland.
That's impressive right out of the gate.
Yeah, they had over 1 million people participating. It's amazing.
So 1 million people in 1911. I mean, were there even 1 million people back then? Just kidding.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of people to get involved right away. I mean, that really shows you how much energy there was behind this movement, even from the very beginning.
Absolutely, and that energy carried over into a lot of other protests and movements, too.
Mhm.
Even the Russian women's protests in 1917, those were inspired, at least in part, by those early International Women's Day celebrations.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and in Russia, those protests were actually a big part of women getting the right to vote in Russia.
That's incredible. So International Women's Day had an impact on like global politics almost right away.
Pretty much.
Wow. But even with all of that activity going on, it still took several more decades before the UN officially recognized International Women's Day in 1975.
Yeah, that's when it really became, this global holiday that's celebrated all over the world.
Right, and since then, they've really tried to use it to focus on a specific theme each year.
Mhm.
Like in 2023, the theme was Digital Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality.
Yeah, that's such an important topic, especially in today's world.
Yeah, because technology is changing so rapidly, and,
Right?
it can be used to empower women, but it can also be used to exploit them, so it's a really complex issue.
Right. And I think that's what's so great about these yearly themes. They really help us to focus the conversation on what matters.
Yeah, and it's not just about celebrating the achievements of women anymore.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
also about raising awareness of the challenges that they still face.
It's a call to action for everyone.
And speaking of achievements, there are so many incredible women throughout history who have made such huge contributions to society.
Absolutely, in every field you can imagine.
Yeah, from science and technology to arts and entertainment, there are so many inspiring stories.
And I think it's important to celebrate those stories,
Right.
but it's also important to acknowledge that those achievements often came in the face of some pretty serious obstacles.
Right. They weren't just handed those successes.
No, they had to
Uh-huh.
fight for them.
Which kind of brings us to the challenges that women still face today, even in 2025.
Hmm.
And I guess one of the biggest ones is the gender pay gap.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's unbelievable that even now, women globally are still earning something like 20% less than men for doing the same work.
It's crazy. It's like we haven't moved past this at all.
And it's not just about the money either. It's about the impact that has on women's lives, their financial security, their ability to invest in their future, even the gender retirement gap.
Right. It affects everything.
Yeah, and then you have the fact that there are still over 130 million girls around the world who are not in school.
Wow.
I mean, that just blows my mind that in this day and age, there are still so many girls being denied access to education.
It's heartbreaking because education is so important. It's the foundation for everything else.
And it perpetuates that cycle of inequality.
Exactly.
And then there's the whole issue of the glass ceiling, that invisible barrier that prevents women from reaching the top in so many professions.
It's so frustrating because you see so many talented women
Mhm.
who are just as qualified as their male counterparts, but they're constantly hitting that ceiling.
Yeah, and it's like it doesn't matter how hard they work or how much they achieve, they're always going to be held back by those systemic barriers.
Right. And it's not just in the corporate world either. It's in politics. It's in academia. It's everywhere.
And of course, we can't forget about the violence and discrimination that women continue to experience all around the world.
Yeah, that's a huge problem.
The fact that 1 in 3 women will experience some form of violence in their lifetime is just horrifying.
And it's not just physical violence either. It's emotional abuse,
Yeah.
it's sexual harassment, it's all kinds of things.
And it's so important that we talk about these issues openly and honestly because they're not going to go away on their own.
Right. We need to shine a light on these problems and make sure that people are aware of
Well,
them.
we need to make it clear that this is not okay. This is not acceptable, and we're not going to stand for it.
We need to hold perpetrators accountable, and we need to create a culture where women feel safe and empowered to speak out.
Yeah, and it's not just about protecting women, it's about creating a better world for everyone.
Absolutely, because when women are treated equally and with respect, everyone benefits.
Right, it's about creating a more just and equitable society for all.
Exactly, and that's what International Women's Day is all about.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we still have a lot of work to do, but it's also a celebration of how far we've come.
And it's a call to action to keep pushing for progress.
Because even small changes can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Every little bit helps.
So let's all commit to doing our part to create a world where women and girls can thrive.
I'm in.
Me too.
Yeah.
So it can feel a little overwhelming, right, when you start talking about all of these huge challenges.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But I think it's important to remember that there are so many people out there working to make things better.
Oh, for sure. There are a ton of organizations and individuals doing amazing work all over the world.
Yeah, and they're making real progress, so it's not all doom and gloom.
Definitely not.
So maybe instead of focusing on all the problems, we should talk about some of the solutions.
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
Like, what can we actually do, as individuals and as a society to create a world where women have the same opportunities and freedoms as men?
Well, I think education is a really good place to start.
Okay.
Like, we need to make sure that girls have access to quality education at all levels, especially in those STEM fields, you know, science, technology, engineering, math.
Yeah, because those are the fields that are really going to shape the future.
Exactly. And right now, women are still really underrepresented in those areas.
And it's not just about getting girls into those fields, it's about making sure that they feel supported and encouraged to stay there.
Right. We need to create a culture where women feel like they belong in those spaces.
Somewhere they can see themselves as leaders and innovators.
Absolutely. And we need to make sure that they have the resources and the mentorship that they need to succeed.
Yeah, because we need more women in leadership positions in all fields, not just STEM.
Oh, definitely. We need more women making decisions at all levels of society.
And to do that, we need to break down that glass ceiling once and for all.
No more glass ceilings.
And of course, we need to address the violence and discrimination that women still face.
Right. That's a huge issue that we can't ignore.
Yeah, I mean, we need to be talking about this more openly and honestly.
We need to challenge those harmful gender stereotypes that lead to violence and discrimination.
And we need to create a culture of zero tolerance.
Exactly. There should be no excuse for any kind of abuse or harassment.
And we need to make sure that women feel safe and supported to speak out if they've experienced something like that.
Yeah, they need to know that they're not alone and that there are people who will believe them and support them.
And I think celebrating women's achievements is also really important.
Oh, definitely. We need to highlight the incredible things that women are doing all over the world.
Yeah, because it's not just about fixing the problems, it's also about recognizing and celebrating the progress that we've made.
And inspiring the next generation of women and girls.
Exactly, because when you see someone who looks like you achieving great things, it makes you believe that you can do it too.
And I think stories are so powerful in that way.
Yeah, they can really change the narrative.
For sure.
Actually, while I was researching for this deep dive, I came across some amazing stories of women who are doing incredible things all around the world.
Oh, really? Like who?
Well, there's this woman, Arunima Sinha. She's the first female amputee to climb Mount Everest.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know, right? She's such an inspiration. I mean, talk about overcoming adversity.
Seriously, and then to achieve something like that, it's just incredible.
Yeah, it just shows you what's possible when you set your mind to it.
Absolutely.
And then there's Tabitha Karanja from Kenya. She founded one of the largest breweries in Africa.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and she did it in a male-dominated industry. I mean, talk about breaking barriers.
You must be so tough and determined.
Yeah, she's a real trailblazer, and her story is just so inspiring.
It really shows you that women can achieve anything they set their minds to.
Exactly. And then there's Pashtana Durrani. She's running underground schools for girls in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, but also kind of scary.
Yeah, it's incredibly brave of her. I mean, she's risking her life to give those girls an education.
That's true dedication right there.
And it just shows you how much some women are willing to sacrifice to create a better future for others.
It's really humbling.
Yeah, and these are just a few examples. There are so many other women out there doing incredible things every day.
Absolutely. We could do a whole deep dive just on inspiring women.
Maybe we should.
That'd be awesome.
But even though there's so much work still to be done, it's important to remember that International Women's Day is not just about the challenges, it's also about celebrating the progress we've made.
Yeah, we've come a long way.
And it's about recognizing the power and the potential of women and girls all over the world.
And it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more equitable world.
Exactly. So what can we do? What can our listeners do to make a difference?
Well, I think the first step is just being aware of the issues, educating yourself about the challenges that women face.
Right. Because you can't solve a problem if you don't know it exists.
Exactly. And then once you're aware, you can start taking action.
Yeah.
Even small things can make a difference.
Like what kind of small things?
Well, you can support women-owned businesses. You can mentor a young woman. You can donate to organizations that are working to empower women and girls.
You can speak out against sexism and discrimination when you see it.
You can challenge those harmful gender stereotypes that are still so prevalent in our society.
And you can use your voice to amplify the voices of women and girls.
Right, because everyone have a platform these days, whether it's social media or just talking to your friends and family.
And it's important to use that platform for good.
Absolutely, because even small actions can have a ripple effect.
Yeah, and together we can create a world where every woman and girl has the opportunity to thrive.
That's the goal.
That's what we're fighting for.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we?
We really have. It's been quite a journey exploring all the different facets of International Women's Day.
Yeah, from the early history to the ongoing challenges and all the amazing achievements in between.
And what really stands out to me is the resilience and the collective action that we see driving progress, even in the face of adversity.
When I started researching for this deep dive, I thought I had a pretty good understanding of International Women's Day. I mean, I knew the basics.
But I have to say, I've learned so much. It's way more complex and multifaceted than I ever realized.
It really is, and it just shows you that there's always more to learn and more ways to engage with this topic.
Yeah, and I think what's become clear is that International Women's Day is so much more than just a symbolic day on the calendar. It's a real catalyst for change.
It is. It's a global movement that's constantly evolving and pushing for progress.
And one of the biggest takeaways for me is that we can all be part of that movement,
Absolutely.
It's not just about waiting for governments or big organizations to make changes.
Right. It's about individual action, too.
Yeah, like we were talking about before, even small things can make a difference.
Exactly. And those small actions can add up to create real change.
Whether it's challenging gender stereotypes in conversations,
supporting women-led initiatives,
or just amplifying women's voices on social media.
Every little bit helps.
It's all about creating a more inclusive and equitable world.
And I think it's so important to remember that gender equality benefits everyone, not just women.
Oh, totally. It's not a zero-sum game,
Exactly.
When women thrive, everyone thrives.
Societies are stronger, economies are more prosperous.
It's just a better world for all of us.
Couldn't agree more.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Okay.
International Women's Day is not just about celebrating women. It's about creating a world where every single person, regardless of gender, has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
That's a great message to end on.
And it's something that we should all be striving for, not just on March 8th, but every single day.
Absolutely well said.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a more equitable world.
We could do this.